I still remember the sound of the phone that night. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a soft vibration on the nightstand, buzzing against the wood like it was unsure if it should interrupt my sleep. I almost ignored it. That alone says more about my life than I want to admit. For years, my phone stayed quiet. No calls. No messages. No one asking how I was doing or if I needed anything. After a while, silence becomes familiar. It becomes normal. You stop expecting people to reach out, especially the ones who used to call you dad. So when the phone buzzed at 2:17 in the morning, my first thought wasn't worry. It was confusion. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment, listening to my own breathing, feeling the weight of the years pressing down on my chest. My room was dark, except for the faint glow of the digital clock. The numbers looked too bright in the silence. 2:17 a.m. No one calls me at that hour. I rolled onto my side and reached for the phone, half expecting a wrong number or some automated message. My eyes were slow to focus. My body felt stiff, like it always does these days. Then I saw the name. My son. My oldest. The one who hadn't spoken to me in almost 4 years. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. I blinked. I looked again. The name didn't disappear. My hand started to shake. I didn't answer right away. That might sound cruel or cold, but when someone disappears from your life for years, your heart builds walls to survive. You don't tear them down in a second, even when you want to. The phone buzzed again, then stopped. I sat up in bed, my chest tight, my mouth dry. I could feel my pulse in my ears. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my head at once. Why now? What happened? Did I do something wrong again? I pressed the call back button before I could talk myself out of it. It rang once, twice. Then I heard his voice. Dad. That single word broke something open inside me. His voice was older, deeper, tired, but it was still him. Still my boy. The one I used to carry on my shoulders. The one who used to fall asleep on the couch with his head against my arm. I couldn't speak at first. Dad? He said again, this time louder. Are you there? Yes, I whispered. I'm here. There was a pause on the line. I could hear breathing. Fast. Uneven. Like he was trying not to fall apart. We need you, he said. Those words hit me harder than any insult ever had. We need you. Not I'm sorry. Not how are you. Not even I miss you. But we need you. For years, I told myself I didn't matter to them anymore. That they had their own lives, their own families, their own reasons for staying away. I learned how to live with that pain by pretending I wasn't needed. And now, in the middle of the night, my son was telling me they needed me. What's wrong? I asked, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. There was another pause. Longer this time. It's Mom, he said. My heart dropped. I hadn't heard her name spoken out loud in a long time. Not by them. Not by anyone who mattered. What about her? I asked. She collapsed, he said. The doctors, they don't know yet. They asked for family. And his voice cracked. I didn't know who else to call. I closed my eyes. In that moment, years of silence, resentment, guilt, and regret rushed back all at once. Every missed birthday, every holiday spent alone, every message I typed and deleted because I didn't want to seem desperate. And now this. I'm coming, I said without thinking. You are? He asked, sounding almost surprised. Yes, I said again. I'm coming. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The room felt different. Smaller. Heavier. Like it was holding its breath with me. I hadn't seen my kids in years. Not since the day everything fell apart. Not since they decided I was easier to forget than to forgive. As I got dressed in the quiet of my small apartment, memories came back in pieces. Not all at once. Just flashes. My daughter's laugh when she was little. My son's serious face when he tried to act grown. Family dinners that felt warm and loud and alive. And then the slow fade. The arguments. The distance. The silence. I grabbed my keys and paused at the door. For a moment, I looked around the apartment. It was clean but empty. No photos on the walls. No signs that a family had ever lived here. This was the life I ended up with. Alone. Quiet. Predictable. As I stepped into the night air, I realized something that scared me more than the phone call itself. I didn't know who I was walking back into their lives as. Was I still their father? Or just a stranger they called when they had no other choice? The drive to the hospital felt longer than it should have. The roads were empty, lit by streetlights that blurred as my eyes filled with tears I refused to let fall. I kept replaying my son's voice in my head. We need you. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible, but I was terrified of what that meant. I didn't always live in silence. That's the part people don't see when they look at a man like me sitting alone in a small apartment with no pictures on the walls. They assume I was always distant, always quiet, always disconnected. But once my life was loud. Once, it was full of voices calling my name from different rooms. Small footsteps running across the floor. Arguments over homework. Laughter during dinner. Music playing too loud on Saturday mornings. Once, I had a family that felt solid. I met my wife when we were both young and still believed love could fix anything. She had a calm smile and a way of listening that made you feel like your words mattered. I was working long hours back then, trying to build something stable, something real. She believed in me even when I doubted myself. We married quickly, not because we were reckless, but because it felt right. Simple, honest. When our first child was born, my son, I remember holding him in my arms and feeling terrified in a way I had never felt before. He was so small, so fragile. His fingers wrapped around mine like he trusted me without question. I promised him things that day, quiet promises I never said out loud, that I would always be there, that I would protect him, that I would never let him feel alone. A few years later, our daughter arrived. She cried louder than her brother ever did, like she already knew how to demand space in the world. She grew into that voice quickly. Curious, sensitive, strong-willed. Our home wasn't perfect, but it was alive. We ate dinner together most nights. I worked late sometimes, but I tried to make it home before bedtime. I read stories. I helped with school projects. I showed up to games and recitals when I could. I wasn't a bad father, but I wasn't an easy one either. I grew up believing that providing was the same as loving, that keeping the lights on and food on the table was proof enough. I didn't know how to talk about feelings. I didn't know how to explain fear or sadness or disappointment. When things went wrong, I went quiet. That habit followed me into my marriage. My wife needed words, reassurance, presence. When she felt overwhelmed, she wanted to talk. When I felt overwhelmed, I wanted space. We loved each other, but we spoke different emotional languages. At first, we tried to meet in the middle. Then life got heavier. Bills increased. Work became more demanding. The kids grew older and needed more than bedtime stories. They needed guidance, understanding, patience. I was tired all the time, not just physically, but emotionally. I carried stress like a weight I didn't know how to put down. And instead of sharing it, I kept it locked inside. That silence started to create distance. Arguments began quietly. Small comments. Unfinished sentences. Looks across the room that said more than words ever could. "You're never really here," my wife said once, late at night, after the kids were asleep. "I'm right here," I replied, not understanding what she meant. But she wasn't talking about my body. She was talking about my heart. The kids noticed before I did. My son stopped asking me for help with homework. My daughter started going to her mother first with her problems. It wasn't intentional. It just happened. I didn't fight it. That's one of my biggest regrets. As the years passed, the house grew quieter in a different way. Not peaceful, just tense. Like everyone was waiting for something to break. Then one night, it did. The argument wasn't loud. There was no screaming. Just exhaustion spilling out after years of being held back. She told me she felt invisible, unheard, alone, even when we were sitting in the same room. I told her I was doing my best. She told me my best wasn't enough. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. We tried counseling. We tried space. We tried pretending everything was fine for the sake of the kids. But children are smarter than we think. They felt the shift. They absorbed it. They learned how to walk carefully around us. When we finally separated, the kids were old enough to understand something was wrong, but not old enough to understand why. They saw a father who didn't fight hard enough to stay. They saw a mother who cried behind closed doors. They didn't hear the quiet conversations, the compromises, the nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering how we got there. The divorce changed everything. Not overnight. Slowly, like water wearing down stone. The kids stayed mostly with their mother. It made sense. She was the emotional center, the one they talked to, the one they trusted with their feelings. I became the weekend father, then the occasional call father, then the background presence. I didn't disappear on purpose, but I didn't know how to hold on either. Every time I tried to step closer, I felt like I was intruding on a life that no longer included me. And every time I stepped back, the distance grew wider. Birthdays came and went. Holidays felt awkward. Conversations stayed shallow. Eventually, they stopped reaching out, and I told myself they were better off. That lie kept me company for years. There is always a moment you can point to later and say, that's when it ended. At the time, it never feels that clear. It just feels like another hard day layered on top of many others. But looking back, I know exactly when my children stopped seeing me as their father and started seeing me as a problem. It was the day I said the wrong thing when they needed the right one. My son was 17. My daughter was 15. Both old enough to feel deeply, but still young enough to need protection. Their mother had been struggling quietly for a long time. I knew she was tired. I knew she was hurting. But I didn't understand how fragile things had become. Neither did the kids. When she ended up in the hospital for the first time, it wasn't dramatic. Just exhaustion, they said. Stress. A warning sign. But to my children, it felt like the ground shifting under their feet. They called me that night. I remember sitting in my car outside the hospital, engine still running, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I hadn't been invited in yet. I didn't know if I should go inside. That uncertainty followed me everywhere back then. My son got in the passenger seat. He didn't look at me. Why does this keep happening? He asked. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell him everything would be okay, that his mother was strong, that we would figure it out together. Instead, I said what came naturally to me. She needs less stress, I said. Everyone does. He turned toward me then, his eyes sharp with something close to anger. So what are we supposed to do? He asked. Just pretend everything's fine? I felt attacked, cornered, like I was being blamed for something I didn't fully understand. I'm just saying, I replied, my voice tight. Life is hard. We all have to deal with it. That was the wrong answer. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just shut down. My daughter was quieter, but her silence carried more weight. She sat in the back seat, arms wrapped around herself, staring out the window. Neither of them spoke on the drive home. Over the next few months, their mother's health became a constant source of tension. Appointments, medications, worry that never left the room. The kids leaned on her emotionally, even as she struggled to stand herself up. I tried to help the only way I knew how. I offered money. I offered logistics. I offered solutions. What I didn't offer was comfort. One evening, my daughter came to me crying. She was sitting at the kitchen table in my apartment, tears dripping onto her homework. Her hands were shaking. I'm scared, she said. What if Mom doesn't get better? I should have held her. I should have told her it was okay to be scared. I should have let her cry. Instead, I said, you can't think like that. She looked up at me, confused. You have to stay strong, I continued. Worrying won't help her. That was the moment her eyes changed. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. The trust slipping away. The understanding that I wasn't a safe place for her feelings. After that, she stopped coming to me. The final break happened a few weeks later. There was an argument between me and their mother. Not loud, but intense. The kind where every word is sharp because it's been sharpened by years of resentment. The kids were in the next room. I knew they could hear us. I didn't stop. I said things I shouldn't have said. About responsibility. About choices. About how much pressure I was under too. Their mother cried. My son stepped between us. Stop, he said. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched. Just stop. I tried to explain myself. To justify. To make them understand. But explanations sound like excuses when emotions are raw. That night, my son told me they didn't want to come over anymore. Mom needs us, he said. And honestly, you make things harder. Those words didn't feel angry. They felt final. I watched them leave, standing in the doorway of my apartment, feeling like something vital had been taken from me. After that, the calls slowed, then stopped. When their mother's condition worsened, I found out through other people. When my son graduated, I saw pictures online. When my daughter went to college, I wasn't invited to help her move. I told myself they were protecting their mother. I told myself they were young and confused. But deep down, I knew the truth. They had learned to live without me, and I had taught them how. Silence doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly, like fog. At first, you don't notice it. You still hear echoes of what used to be there. Old habits, old expectations. You keep checking your phone. You keep thinking, they'll call tomorrow. Then one day, you realize you stopped checking. That's when it hits you. After my kids stopped coming over, I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they needed time, space, that once things settled with their mother, they would come back around. Weeks passed, then months. I sent messages at first. Simple ones. Safe ones. How are you doing? Thinking about you. Let me know if you need anything. Sometimes I got a short reply. Sometimes nothing at all. I learned quickly that asking too much made things worse. If I pushed, they pulled away further. So I learned to keep my words light. Careful. Small. Eventually, even that felt like too much. Holidays were the hardest. The first Christmas alone felt unreal. I bought gifts anyway. Wrapped them. Put them under a tree that looked too big for the room. I waited until the afternoon, hoping someone would show up. No one did. I donated the gifts a week later. After that, I stopped buying them. Birthdays came next. I sent cards. Then I stopped when they went unanswered. It felt like I was shouting into a void, and each unanswered message took a small piece of my dignity with it. People tell you time heals everything. What they don't tell you is that time also teaches you how to survive without hope. My days became predictable. Work, home, dinner alone, sleep, repeat. I started eating standing up because sitting at the table reminded me of how many chairs were empty. I stopped cooking real meals. There was no one to cook for. I told myself I was fine. But loneliness doesn't announce itself as pain. It disguises itself as routine. Years passed that way. I heard about my children's lives through distant channels. A cousin mentioned my son got married. A friend from church asked if I was excited about becoming a grandfather. That was how I found out. Not through a call. Not through an invitation. Through casual conversation that felt like being cut open without warning. I smiled. I nodded. I said the right things. Inside, something collapsed. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to blame their mother. I wanted to blame my kids for shutting me out. But anger requires energy. And by then, I was tired. So tired. I started questioning everything. Every conversation. Every moment where I chose silence instead of comfort. Strength instead of softness. I replayed that night in the kitchen with my daughter over and over again. Her tears. My words. The space between us that I didn't know how to cross. I wondered if she still remembered that moment. Or if it had simply confirmed something she already believed about me. There were nights I sat in the dark and talked to them out loud. Practiced conversations that would never happen. I'm sorry. I didn't know how. I should have listened. No one heard me. That's what falling feels like. Not dramatic. Not sudden. Just the slow understanding that you have become optional in the lives of the people who once depended on you for everything. I aged faster during those years. My body slowed down. My face changed. I stopped caring how I looked. There was no one left to impress. Sometimes, I imagine what it would be like if I disappeared completely. Not in a dark way. Just quietly. If anyone would notice. That thought scared me enough to keep going. Then came the night my phone buzzed. The night my son called. The night silence finally broke. And I realized something terrifying. I didn't know how to be their father anymore. The hospital lights were too bright. They always are. White. Unforgiving. Like they're designed to show you everything you're trying to hide. Every wrinkle. Every fear. Every regret written across your face. I stood just inside the entrance for a moment, unsure of where to go. My hands were cold. My heart was beating too fast. I felt like a man who had arrived late to something important and didn't know how to explain himself. I hadn't been in a hospital since the day my daughter was born. That thought hit me hard. I followed the signs to the emergency wing, my shoes squeaking softly against the floor. Every step felt heavier than the last. With each one, I wondered if I should turn around. If my presence would make things worse. Then I saw them. My children were sitting in the waiting area, side by side. Older. Changed. But still unmistakably mine. My son looked up first. For a brief second, his face showed surprise. Then something else. Relief, maybe. Or exhaustion. It was hard to tell. You came, he said. Yes, I replied. Of course I did. My daughter stood up slowly. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked at me like she was trying to decide who I was. Hi, I said. Hi, she answered, her voice polite. Distant. We sat down together, three people connected by history, but separated by years of silence. No one knew what to say. The space between us felt fragile, like one wrong word could shatter it. Finally, my son spoke. They're running tests, he said. She's stable, but they don't know much yet. I nodded. I'm here, I said again, not knowing what else to offer. Hours passed. We drank bad coffee from paper cups. We stared at our phones without reading anything. Every time a doctor walked by, our heads snapped up in unison. I wanted to reach out, to place a hand on my daughter's shoulder, to say something that might ease the weight she was carrying. But fear held me back. Fear of rejection. fear of reminding them why they had stayed away. At one point, my daughter rubbed her eyes and whispered, "I'm so tired." Without thinking, I took off my jacket and offered it to her. She hesitated. Then she took it. That small moment felt like a bridge. Later, a doctor came out and spoke in careful words. Nothing certain, nothing comforting, just possibilities and waiting. My son clenched his jaw. My daughter stared at the floor. I remembered the night she cried at my kitchen table. How I told her to be strong instead of letting her be scared. This time, I didn't make that mistake. "It's okay to be afraid," I said quietly. Both of them looked at me. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just sat there with them, letting the silence exist without trying to fix it. Something shifted. Not healed, not forgiven, but softened. As the sun began to rise, my son leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I've been trying to hold everything together for so long." I felt a familiar ache in my chest. "You don't have to do it alone," I said. He didn't respond right away. Then he nodded. That was enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't on the outside looking in. I was there. And for now, that had to be enough. Morning settled into the hospital slowly. The night staff changed. The air felt different. Less urgent, but heavier in a quiet way. Like everyone was tired of waiting, but no one had the courage to leave. My son went to get more coffee. My daughter stayed seated, knees pulled close to her chest, staring at the wall across from us. The jacket I had given her was still around her shoulders. I watched her for a long moment before speaking. "You don't have to wear that," I said gently. "I'm not cold." She shook her head. "It's fine." Her voice was calm, but there was distance in it. The kind that comes from years of careful restraint. I wanted to say her name. I wanted to tell her she looked just like she did when she was little, tired and stubborn and brave. But I didn't trust myself not to say the wrong thing again. So I stayed quiet. When my son returned, he sat down and sighed deeply, rubbing his face with both hands. "She asked about you," he said suddenly. My heart jumped. "She did." He nodded. "Earlier, before she fell asleep. She asked if you knew." I swallowed. "What did you say?" "I told her you were coming," he replied. She just nodded. We sat with that information for a while. It felt strange knowing my name had been spoken in a room I hadn't entered yet. That somewhere down the hall, the woman I once loved was lying in a hospital bed, aware that I was nearby. Time passed again. Then, finally, a nurse approached us. "She's awake," she said. "One at a time." My son stood first, then stopped. "You should go," he said, looking at me. I hesitated. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "She asked about you." My legs felt heavy as I followed the nurse down the hall. Each step echoed with memory. Arguments. Promises. The life we once shared. The room was quiet. Machines hummed softly. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Her eyes open when I stepped inside. For a moment, we just looked at each other. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. No anger. No accusation. Just two people standing in the aftermath of a long story. "I didn't expect you," she said. "I didn't expect the call," I answered. She gave a tired smile. Life has a way of doing that. We talked carefully. About her health. About the kids. About nothing too close to the wound. "I know they blame you," she said quietly. I shook my head. "No, they don't." "They do," she insisted. "But they blame me too. And mostly, they blame themselves." That hurt more than anything else. "I never wanted them in the middle," I said. "Neither did I," she replied. "But they were always watching." When I left the room, my son and daughter were waiting. "She's okay for now," I said. My daughter exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Later that day, we sat together outside the hospital. The sun was warm. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. "I don't hate you," my daughter said suddenly. I turned to her, surprised. "I just didn't know how to talk to you," she continued. "Every time I tried, I felt like I had to be strong. And I didn't want to be strong anymore." My chest tightened. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't know how to help without trying to fix everything." She nodded. "I know." That was the closest thing to forgiveness I had heard in years. And it was enough to keep me standing. Being needed feels different than being wanted. I learned that over the next few days. After the hospital visit, I stayed nearby. Not because anyone asked me to, but because leaving felt wrong. Like walking away again would undo whatever fragile connection had formed between us. My children didn't tell me to go home. They didn't tell me to stay either. So I existed in that space between. We took turns visiting their mother. We sat together in waiting rooms. We shared meals that tasted like nothing. We talked about practical things. Doctors, schedules, insurance, the safe topics. No one brought up the past, but it was there, in every pause, every careful word. One afternoon, my son asked me to drive him home so he could shower and change. It was a small thing, ordinary, but it felt enormous to me. We drove in silence for a while. Then he spoke. "I used to be so angry at you," he said, staring out the window. "I know," I replied. "I thought you didn't care," he continued. "That you chose yourself over us." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I didn't know how to show up," I said. "That's not the same as not caring. But I understand why it felt that way." He nodded slowly. "I grew up fast," he said. "I felt like I had to." I didn't tell him I noticed, that I saw the weight he carried even back then. I just said, "I'm sorry you had to." That was all. Back at the hospital, my daughter started sitting closer to me. Not touching, just closer. Sometimes she leaned against the chair between us when she was tired. I didn't move away. One night, she asked, "Why didn't you fight harder for us?" The question was soft, not angry, but it cut deep. "I thought giving space was respect," I said. "I didn't realize it felt like abandonment." She nodded, tears in her eyes. It did. I let that sit between us. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I just listened. That was new for me. Their mother stayed in the hospital longer than expected. Complications. More waiting. More uncertainty. During that time, something changed. They started asking me small things. "Can you pick up food? Can you talk to the nurse? Can you stay while I take a break?" I did all of it without hesitation. But at night, alone in my car, doubt crept in. Are they letting me back in? Or are they just overwhelmed? I realized something uncomfortable. I was useful, but usefulness is not the same as love. Still, I showed up. Because maybe that's where love starts again. There are mistakes you regret because they caused pain. And then there are mistakes you regret because they took something away quietly, without you even noticing. Those are harder to forgive. One afternoon, while my son and daughter were visiting their mother, I stayed behind in the waiting room. My back ached. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. The chair felt harder than it should have. I watched families come and go, some arguing, some crying, some holding hands like they were afraid to let go. I realized something then. I had been present for events, but I had been absent for emotions. I thought back to all the moments when my kids needed reassurance, not solutions. When they needed to be heard, not corrected. When silence from me felt like indifference to them. I didn't fail them in one big way. I failed them in 1,000 small ones. When my son felt overwhelmed and I told him life was hard. When my daughter cried and I told her to be strong. When I chose distance because it felt safer than vulnerability. I had confused control with care. Later that evening, my daughter sat next to me again. She looked tired, older than she should have. "Do you remember when Mom first got sick?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I thought you were mad at us," she said. "Like we were a burden." My heart sank. "No," I said quickly, then stopped myself. I wasn't. But I understand why you thought that." She nodded. "I wish you had just told us you were scared too." That sentence stayed with me. I had spent my life hiding fear, believing it made me weak. I didn't realize that hiding it made me unreachable. That night, after visiting hours ended, we sat in the car together before heading home. "I need to say something," I said. They both looked at me. "I wasn't the father you needed when things got hard," I continued. "Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't know how to show it. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't promise to change. I just told the truth." My son looked down. My daughter wiped her eyes. "That helps," she said quietly. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was honest. And honesty felt like the first real step forward. It was late at night when I got the call. I had been dozing in the waiting area, curled in a chair, half asleep, half thinking about all the things I had failed to say to my children over the years. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was my daughter. Her voice was trembling. "Dad, it's Mom," she said. "They're saying, I don't know how to explain it. You need to get here. Now." I felt my stomach drop. I wasn't scared at first. I didn't think it would happen. I hadn't believed for years that anything would truly tear through the walls I'd built between us. But this urgency shattered everything. I grabbed my keys, my coat, my bag, anything I could think of, and ran to my car. The streets blurred past me. The lights of the city streaked in the darkness. I didn't notice them. I didn't notice anything except the sound of my own breathing and the knot of fear tightening in my chest. When I arrived at the hospital, My son was waiting outside the emergency wing, pacing. His face was pale, eyes wide, and hands clenched into fists. "Dad," he said without looking at me, "we don't know how long we have. They're saying it could get worse fast." I followed him inside. My daughter was already there, sitting beside their mother's bed, holding her hand. The room smelled of antiseptic and machines. Lights hummed softly. A monitor beeped steadily, but each pulse felt heavier than the last. I froze. She looked up when I entered. Weak. Fragile. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I realized how vulnerable she had always been. How much she had carried alone, and how much I had missed. "Dad," my son whispered. I stepped closer and gently touched my wife's hand. She gave a faint squeeze, the faintest acknowledgement of my presence. That was enough. The doctor arrived moments later, serious and calm. They explained that Mom's condition had deteriorated unexpectedly. "We are doing everything we can," the doctor said, "but she needs constant attention." I sat beside my children. None of us spoke at first. The air was heavy, thick with years of unspoken regrets, love suppressed, and fears unshared. Then my daughter whispered, barely audible, "I was so scared." "I know," I said. "I know now." My son's voice broke as he added, "I didn't know if you'd even come. For years I thought maybe you didn't care." I swallowed hard. "I always cared," I said. "I just didn't know how to show it." We sat there for hours, sometimes holding her hand, sometimes just being together. Time slowed, yet the weight of it pressed down on us, reminding me that nothing lasts forever. Later, the doctor asked us to step outside. Alone, in the hallway, my children and I faced each other. There was no anger, no bitterness, only a raw, fragile understanding that life could end abruptly. That nothing we had withheld, no regrets, no missed words, mattered as much as this moment. "I don't want to lose her," my son admitted, his voice trembling. "I don't either," I said. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Years of absence, silence, and emotional distance didn't just hurt me. They could cost us our chance to rebuild. I turned to my daughter. Her eyes were wet. "I don't want to lose her either," I said. She nodded. "Then, we have to be here. All of us." We returned to the room together. Side by side, three people who had lived apart emotionally for years, now united by fear, love, and necessity. For hours, we sat there. We held hands. We shared memories softly. We cried. We didn't try to explain the past. We didn't make excuses. We simply existed as a family in a way we hadn't for years. That night, the twist revealed itself. I was no longer a man on the outside, watching life happen. I was needed, not just for logistics, not just for presence, but for love. And fear had stripped away all pretense. It was terrifying, but also profoundly beautiful. We stayed with her through the night. There were moments of despair. Moments where the beeping machines felt like a countdown. Moments where silence screamed louder than any words could. And yet, in those moments, I began to understand the truth I had avoided for so long. Being needed is a privilege. Being allowed back in, even through crisis, is a gift. But it does not erase the past. It does not undo years of mistakes. It only gives you a chance to start again. I looked at my children. The distance that had felt permanent for years seemed thinner somehow. Fragile, yes, but thinner. That was the twist. The moment when everything could have been lost. And yet, everything was still possible. The hospital was quiet at night, but not silent. The machines hummed, lights blinked, and somewhere down the hall, the soft shuffle of nurses on their rounds reminded us that life was moving, whether we were ready or not. We didn't sleep. None of us. My children and I sat in shifts, holding our mother's hand, talking softly, sharing stories that had been left unsaid for years. It was strange and uncomfortable at first, awkward words, pauses filled with memory and guilt, but slowly, the tension began to ease. My son spoke first. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything I thought about you, for pushing you away, for," his voice cracked. He swallowed and looked down. "For not trusting you." I reached out and touched his shoulder. "I'm sorry too," I said quietly, "for all the times I wasn't the father you needed, for all the words I left unsaid. I was scared, and I failed you both." My daughter looked at me then. "I blamed you too," she admitted, "for leaving, for being distant, for not noticing when I was hurting." "I know," I said. "I see it now. I see everything I missed." There were tears. Soft, silent, but enough to remind me that emotions could no longer be hidden behind walls or distance. Hours passed, and we didn't speak much. Sometimes just holding hands, sometimes watching her breathe. The quiet moments were heavier than the words we had exchanged. Each beep of the monitor reminded us that time was fragile, that life could shift in an instant. I thought about the years I had wasted, the birthdays, the graduations, the milestones I had missed. I realized that regret isn't just a feeling. It's a weight you carry in your chest, pressing down every time you remember what you could have done differently. And now, fear had made the weight almost unbearable. I realized that this crisis was giving us something we had never had: presence. Not perfection, not happiness, just presence. And it was raw, painful, but necessary. Confessions from the kids. Late into the night, my daughter leaned against my shoulder. "I didn't know how to let you in," she said. "I was scared you wouldn't understand me, that you'd judge me or get angry. I wanted you to fight for me, but I didn't know how to ask. I understand now," I whispered. "I wish I had known sooner. I wish I had fought for you too, in the way you needed." My son nodded. We were angry, and we were scared. We felt like we had to protect Mom and ourselves. But seeing you here, it makes me realize you always cared, even if you didn't know how to show it. The honesty of their words hit me harder than anything else. Love and fear had been tangled for years. Misunderstandings had created a chasm between us that seemed insurmountable. But here we were, together. We talked through the night, about the past, about the small regrets, about the moments when silence had been louder than words. We admitted mistakes we had carried alone. We cried. We laughed softly, remembering moments of childhood that still carried warmth. The night taught me something vital. Family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. Even when you don't know the right words. Even when fear or guilt makes you want to turn away. Reflections on personal regrets. I thought back to the kitchen table, to my daughter crying, to the times I told my children to be strong rather than letting them feel. I realized those moments defined the years of distance more than anything else. I hadn't understood that being present is not just about showing up physically. It's about showing up emotionally. It's about being willing to feel with them, to hold space for their pain, to carry a portion of their fear without judgment. This realization was painful, brutally so. I wanted to cry at the unfairness of time, how easily it slips through our fingers, how cruelly it reminds us of all we have lost. But I also felt a small spark of hope. That spark was enough to keep me present in that room, enough to hold my children's hands and be here for the woman I had loved for decades. The fragile resolutions. By morning, there was a fragile rhythm between us. Small gestures, a touch on the shoulder, a whisper of understanding. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a sudden fix for years of absence and silence. But it was a start. I realized that the twist, the crisis that brought us back together, was a reminder of mortality. That life is fleeting. That waiting to fix things until the perfect time is a luxury we rarely get. Being needed, I understood now, is both a gift and a responsibility. And I was determined not to squander it this time. I didn't know what the next days would bring. I didn't know if forgiveness would come fully, or if the wounds would ever truly heal. But I did know this. I would be here, fully present, vulnerable, honest. No more walls. No more silence. For the first time in years, I felt like a father again. By late morning, the quiet rhythm of the night had shifted. The monitors in Mom's room began to beep faster, a sound that no parent or child ever wants to hear. The nurse came in quickly, calling instructions in calm but urgent tones. I grabbed my children's hands instinctively. My son's grip was tight, almost painful, and my daughter's fingers trembled in mine. It was as if the crisis had stripped away the years of distance, and all that remained was pure, raw fear. The doctor explained that her condition had worsened. Complications were serious, and they needed to act fast. My stomach sank. Years of absence, regrets, and quiet resentment all collided into a single, suffocating moment. I turned to my children. Their faces mirrored my own anxiety, but underneath it, I saw something I hadn't for years: the need for me. Not as a father who controlled, or fixed, or judged, but as a presence, a steady hand, someone to anchor them as the world felt like it was collapsing. We watched the team wheel her away to emergency surgery. The hallway felt impossibly long as we followed at a distance. My daughter leaned into me slightly. My son placed a hand on my shoulder. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a stranger in my own family. In the waiting room, the hours stretched endlessly. The minutes were long, and the air was thick with anticipation. My children sat silently, but I could feel their minds racing. I could see their memories of me, the good, the bad, the absent moments, flashing behind their eyes. And I realized something painful. Those years we had lost could never be regained. But right now we had this fragile, terrifying present. I spoke first. We're here, all of us, and we'll stay here, no matter what. My son nodded. I know, and it helps, Dad. I can't explain it, but it does. My daughter added quietly, I think. I've missed having you here. Those words hit me harder than any reprimand or rejection from the past. Missed presence is a weight, heavier than anything I had carried. And now, in the face of potential loss, we were finally acknowledging it. Hours passed. We shared memories of the small, ordinary moments, soccer games, bedtime stories, and the quiet Sunday mornings that used to feel safe. We didn't try to fill the years of absence with promises. We simply sat, spoke, and grieved together, both the fear for her life and the grief for the time we lost. Confessions in the face of fear. The tension of the day brought truths to the surface. My daughter whispered something I had longed to hear. I was angry, Dad. I didn't just miss you. I resented you. I thought you didn't care about me at all. I know, I replied, voice shaking. And I understand. I failed to show up in the ways that mattered. I'm so sorry. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I needed you, and you weren't there. And I didn't know how to ask. My son added, tears in his eyes. And I blamed you for not trying, for not seeing what we needed. But I understand now, it wasn't that simple. We sat like that for hours, acknowledging pain, confessing regrets, and holding on to each other in a way we hadn't in over a decade. The hospital had become our confessional, our sanctuary, and our place to finally confront truths too long buried. I realized then that love is often expressed through presence. It is not always in grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes, it is simply sitting together, in fear, in uncertainty, in silence, and saying, without words, I am here. The internal reckoning. Later, I stepped outside for a breath. The sun was low, soft light spilling over the city streets. I felt the weight of years pressing down. Every missed call, every absence, every silence echoed in my chest. But I also felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. A fragile, trembling hope that maybe the thread between us had not been severed completely. I realized something vital. The crisis forced a reckoning I had avoided for years. I had to confront my failures, not for their forgiveness, but for my own understanding. And in doing so, I began to see that the cost of absence is immense, but it is never too late to be present if you are willing to face your fear, your guilt, and your shame. Returning to the waiting room, I sat between my children. We held hands again. I didn't speak much. Words felt inadequate. Presence, I knew now, was enough. And in that shared silence, I felt something shift, a recognition that we could start anew, no matter how fragile the bond felt. Small breakthroughs and tentative trust. Hours turned into near night. The surgical team emerged. Mom was stable, not fully recovered, but stable. Relief washed over us like a wave, leaving us exhausted but grateful. We laughed quietly, softly, unable to contain the tension we had carried all day. My daughter rested her head on my shoulder again. My son leaned close. The bond we had lost over years of silence was slowly returning, not fully healed, not fully reconciled, but present. And I realized, trust is built in moments like these, not in grand apologies or declarations of love, but in showing up when it matters most. The crisis had been terrifying, yes, but it had also been transformative. It forced us to confront what we could lose. And in doing so, it revealed what truly mattered: presence, honesty, and the courage to feel together. The night stretched long and quiet. The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered softly above us, and the hum of machines provided a strange kind of comfort. It was a lullaby for people who had been awake far too long, thinking about the past, fearing the future, and carrying the weight of years of silence. My children and I sat around their mother's bed. Each of us had taken turns keeping watch. Some moments were filled with whispered conversations, and others were heavy with silence. That silence was not empty. It was full of unspoken truths, regrets, and the fragile hope that we might start over. I thought about the mistakes I had made. Every missed opportunity to show love. Every time I had chosen distance over connection. Every night I spent alone, believing they were better off without me. Those years pressed on my chest like a stone, and I let the weight of them fill me. I hate that I left, I whispered, almost to myself. My children looked at me. They didn't interrupt, didn't scold. They just listened. That act of listening, quiet as it was, felt like forgiveness in its own way. My daughter spoke softly. We were scared too. I didn't know how to let you in. I felt abandoned. Yes, but also confused. You were here sometimes, but never really. And I didn't know if you even wanted to understand us. I nodded. I wanted to, but I didn't know how. I thought being strong for you was the answer. I see now that it wasn't. I should have been present in a different way. I should have been vulnerable. My son, sitting across from us, finally spoke. I blamed you for leaving. But now I realize. I also blamed myself. I thought if I had asked more, or needed you more, maybe things would have been different. And that's unfair, because it's not on us. It's on all of us, in a way. I swallowed. The truth of his words struck me deeply. Years of anger, frustration, and misunderstanding had piled up between us. It wasn't about blame anymore. It was about understanding. We spent the rest of the night sharing stories. Small moments we had once taken for granted. Memories of holidays, birthdays, and weekends that had seemed ordinary then, but felt sacred now. We laughed softly at the stories we remembered differently, and cried quietly over the ones we had forgotten. It was painful. It was beautiful. It was real. The first signs of reconnection. By the early morning, a fragile rhythm had formed. My children began to rely on me again. Not fully, not completely, but in small ways. They asked for advice. They asked me to be present. They sought comfort, and I gave it without hesitation. I realized something profound. Love doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. It demands honesty. It demands the courage to feel, even when it is uncomfortable. During a quiet moment, my daughter rested her head on my shoulder. My son leaned close, and for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of my family around me. Not perfect, not complete, but present. And that was enough. The emotional bond strengthens amidst fear. Over the next few days, we moved through routines together. Meals, walks in the hospital garden, brief moments of laughter amidst the tension of recovery. Each interaction, each shared smile, rebuilt the bridge we had long abandoned. I realized that crises do not only reveal fear, they reveal character. They reveal who we are at our core. My children and I discovered each other again. Not the children I raised or the father I thought I was, but the real, flawed, present versions of ourselves. Fear had forced us to confront the truth that life is fleeting, that time cannot be reclaimed, that absence carries weight, and that presence, however small or fragile, can heal more than years of silence ever could. Silent promises and tentative trust. Before leaving the hospital one evening, I looked at my children. I don't know what comes next, I said softly. I don't know if things will be easy. I don't know if I can fix the past. But I promise you this, I will be here. I will not walk away again. I will try to understand, to listen, and to be present, no matter what. My daughter smiled faintly. My son nodded. And in that small acknowledgement, I felt the first true signs of trust returning. It was tentative, fragile, but it was there. We left the hospital together, side by side, each step a quiet act of courage. Each shared breath a reminder that we had survived the worst moments and that the bond between us, though tested, was still alive. And I realized finally, the twist, the crisis that had terrified us, had also given us something invaluable. It had forced honesty. It had demanded presence. It had shown us that love, even when imperfect, endures. The final night in the hospital was unlike anything I had experienced in years. Exhaustion pressed down on us, but the shared fear, grief, and love created a bond one hadn't realized was possible after so long apart. My children and I had been broken apart by years of absence, by silence, by mistakes, and now we were slowly piecing ourselves together in this fragile, dimly lit room. We sat around Mom's bed, holding hands, sharing stories of our childhood, our struggles, and our regrets. My son's voice was calm, almost reflective. "Dad," he said, "I think I understand now. You weren't perfect. You didn't always know what to do, but you were there, even when we didn't realize it. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. I tried, in the only way I knew how. But I see now that wasn't enough. I see now that presence isn't just about showing up. It's about feeling with you, being with you, and listening. My daughter squeezed my hand, tears glistening in her eyes. I was angry at you for a long time. I thought you didn't care. But I see that you did in your own way. You just didn't know how to show it. And I'm learning how to let you in now. Her words struck me deeper than any apology could. For the first time in over a decade, I felt a part of my family again. Not fully healed, not fully whole, but truly present. We spent hours in quiet conversation, sharing fears and confessions. I admitted my regrets, the times I should have comforted rather than corrected, listened rather than advised, stayed close rather than distant. They admitted their frustrations, their misunderstandings, and their loneliness caused by my absence. Each confession felt like a weight being lifted, a wall coming down brick by brick. The moments of laughter came next, small, soft, and careful at first. A memory triggered a giggle from my daughter, a story from my son made us all smile. And in those smiles, I realized something important. Joy can return, even after years of sorrow, if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and present. As the night deepened, I sat with them in the quiet, holding their hands. The machines hummed softly, steady, and reliable. Mom was stable, recovering, but the lessons of the past were alive in our hearts. I realized that family is not about perfection or the absence of mistakes. It's about showing up, being present, and choosing love over pride, fear, or anger. I whispered to them both, I don't know what the future holds. I can't promise it will be easy, but I promise I will not walk away again. I will stay, I will listen, I will be here. Every day I can. They nodded, resting against me. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, but that night, in that quiet, fragile way, a bond had begun again. A bond forged in crisis, strengthened by vulnerability, and nurtured by love. The twist, the terrifying crisis that had brought us back together, had given us a gift I had never imagined. It forced honesty. It demanded presence. It revealed the fragility of life and the importance of embracing the people we love before it's too late. That night, I slept lightly in a chair beside my children. Not because I wasn't tired, but because I wanted to stay close. To witness. To be part of their lives again. And in that light sleep, in the quiet hum of machines and the faint warmth of their presence, I felt a hope that had been absent for years. Hope that family can heal. Hope that love, even imperfect, endures. Hope that the mistakes of the past can guide us to a better present. And I realized the truth I had avoided for so long. It is never too late to show up. It is never too late to care. It is never too late to rebuild the bonds that time and distance may have strained. That night marked the turning point. Not the end of our struggles, not the perfect ending, but the first step toward a family that, despite everything, could love again. The next morning, as the sun spilled golden light into the hospital room, I looked at my children and my wife, and I knew we had survived more than a crisis. We had survived the weight of absence, the ache of regret, and the silence of years. And somehow, against all odds, we had begun to rebuild. I whispered quietly to myself, we're here. Finally, we're here. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The weeks that followed my mother's hospitalization were quiet but profound. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still moments of tension, still reminders of the years we had lost. But something had shifted. A fragile, quiet understanding had taken root in all of us. A sense that love is not always loud, not always perfect, but most important when it is present. I spent mornings making coffee for my children, just as I had years ago. But now, the act felt different. It wasn't about routine or obligation. It was about care, about showing up for them in ways that mattered. Sometimes, my daughter would sit across from me, her eyes still wary but softening day by day. Sometimes my son would linger over breakfast, sharing stories of work, friends, and memories we had long neglected to explore together. I learned that forgiveness doesn't always come with words. Sometimes it comes in gestures, sharing a meal, holding a hand, listening without interruption. I saw it in the quiet way my children began to trust me again. Not fully, not without caution, but enough to let me back into their lives. There were times I wanted to dwell on the past, to relive the mistakes I had made, to wonder if I had lost too much. But I realized that regret, while necessary to acknowledge, cannot be allowed to dominate the present. Instead, it must guide us to act differently, to show up, to love even when it is hard. One evening, as the sun set and the golden light filled our home, I watched my children laughing over something small and trivial. The sound was like music I hadn't realized I had been missing for years. I felt tears prick my eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief, of gratitude, of a love that had been tested and, in its own fragile way, endured. I thought about the years of absence, the moments of silence, the times I had chosen distance over connection. I thought about the fear, the anger, and the grief that had marked our lives. And I understood, finally, that being present, truly present, is the greatest gift we can offer. It doesn't erase the past, but it allows the future to grow. I reflected on the truth that life is fragile, that moments can be lost in an instant, that time cannot be reclaimed, and that love cannot be assumed. It must be expressed, nurtured, and shown every single day. So I made a promise, not just to my children, but to myself. I promised to be there, to listen, to feel with them, to show them, in every small and ordinary way, that they matter, that they are loved, that the mistakes of the past will not define the rest of our lives together. And slowly, quietly, our family began to heal. We didn't need grand gestures. We didn't need perfection. We needed honesty, presence, and a willingness to face the past without letting it control the present. We shared small moments, meals, conversations, quiet evenings together. That became the foundation of a renewed relationship. And in that, I found the greatest lesson of all. Love is not measured in the years you have, the distance you've traveled, or the mistakes you've made. It is measured in the courage to show up, to remain present, to forgive, and to allow yourself to be forgiven. Life will always test us. Circumstances will change, and people will fail. But when we choose presence, when we choose love even in its quietest form, we give ourselves, and those we care about, a chance to heal, to grow, and to be truly together. As I watched my children sleep that night, I whispered softly, almost to myself, "We are here. We are together." And that is enough. For the first time in years, the weight of absence felt lighter. For the first time, the future felt possible. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I understood that family, imperfect, fractured, and deeply human, is the most precious gift we can ever hold. The days after my mother's recovery were slower, quieter, but they carried a new weight, a weight of possibility, of reconnection, and of fragile hope. The hospital's fluorescent lights had been replaced by the soft glow of morning sun in our home. The rhythm of ordinary life had returned, but it no longer felt ordinary. I watched my children move through their days differently now. They laughed more freely. They spoke more openly. They let me be part of their lives in ways that, for years, I had only imagined. And I learned that rebuilding trust is not about grand gestures. It's about showing up every day, in small ways, consistently, and without expectation. We started sharing meals together again. Not the quiet, rushed dinners of the past, but conversations that lingered, where no one felt the need to hide or perform. Sometimes we spoke of the past. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we sat in silence, simply appreciating the presence of one another. I found myself reflecting often on what I had missed. The birthdays I hadn't attended, the graduations I hadn't celebrated, the quiet tears I hadn't seen. I felt grief for all of it, a grief that I knew would linger, but I also felt gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance I had been given. Gratitude for the opportunity to witness my children's lives now, to be part of them in real, tangible ways. One afternoon, my daughter sat with me on the porch. "Dad," she said, "I think I understand now. You weren't perfect, but you were always trying, even when I couldn't see it." Her words pierced me, not because they were harsh, but because they carried honesty, forgiveness, and acceptance. I realized then that being present is more than physical. It's emotional, spiritual, and requires humility. It requires acknowledging your failures while refusing to let them define the future. I began to notice small signs of healing in myself as well. I wasn't constantly anxious about making up for lost time. I was learning to appreciate the slow, steady rebuilding of connection. I was learning that love, when expressed consistently and honestly, is stronger than years of absence. Sometimes, in the evenings, I would sit quietly and think about the twists of life, the moments when fear, pride, or circumstance had kept us apart. I understood that those twists, while painful, had also taught me the most valuable lesson. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is permanent. And love is an action, not a feeling. In these reflections, I also realized the depth of forgiveness my children had offered, not in words alone, but in gestures, in willingness to let me back into their lives, and in allowing me to share their moments of vulnerability. It was a gift I could never repay, only honor through my continued presence and honesty. The quiet nights became our time. We would sit together, sometimes talking, sometimes in silence. I held my children close, physically and emotionally, and understood the profound importance of simply being there. In those moments, there were no regrets, only a deep awareness that love is sustained through presence, patience, and courage. I understood now that life's challenges, illness, separation, mistakes, do not have to define a family. What matters is how we respond, how we show up, how we face fear, regret, and loss. And most importantly, how we choose to love, even in the quietest, simplest ways. As I tucked my children into bed that night, I felt a calm I had not known for decades. The years of absence were still there, like scars, but they no longer dictated the story. The story was ours to write now, together, with honesty, patience, and presence. I whispered to myself, softly, "We are here. We survived the worst. And we will move forward. Together." The days that followed were filled with quiet routines, small joys, and subtle reminders that life continues, even after crisis. But for the first time in years, those routines carried meaning. Every meal shared, every conversation, every laugh, and every quiet moment of reflection reminded me of what truly matters: presence, love, and the courage to face our mistakes and fears. I started noticing the small things about my children again. The way my son furrowed his brow when he concentrated, the slight tremor in my daughter's hands when she laughed too hard, the softness in their voices when they spoke about memories long past. I realized that these small details, often unnoticed, are the threads that weave a family together. They are the moments that matter more than grand gestures or perfect words. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the curtains, my daughter walked into the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She placed one in front of me and said, softly, "I don't say this enough. Dad, thank you for being here." I looked at her, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I don't deserve thanks," I said quietly. "I just want to be here. That's all I can do." She smiled, the kind of smile that carries trust and forgiveness in equal measure. "Being here is enough," she said. It struck me then, after everything, after the years of absence, the misunderstandings, the silent resentment, being present was indeed enough. And it had the power to heal wounds I had thought were permanent. The lessons of silence and presence. I thought back over the years I had missed. All the moments of silence that had grown between us like walls. I realized that silence is not always empty. It can be loud, carrying fear, hurt, and distance. But it can also be broken with courage, honesty, and the simple act of showing up. Love is not always loud. It is not always easy. It doesn't always come in grand gestures or dramatic words. Sometimes, love is quiet. Sometimes, love is patience, presence, and willingness to feel with someone even when it hurts. I began to understand that being a father, a son, a husband, or a family member is less about perfection and more about consistency. It is about showing up, day after day, even when the past weighs heavily and the mistakes seem unfixable. That presence, steady, patient, and honest, is what builds trust, nurtures love, and strengthens the bonds that time and distance may have strained. Moments of shared joy. Over the following weeks, we began creating new memories. We took small trips together, cooked meals as a family, and laughed over stories from the past. Each moment, simple as it was, carried the weight of recovery, reconciliation, and hope. One afternoon, my son and I were fixing the garden fence together. He handed me a hammer, grinning, and I realized something profound. These ordinary moments, moments I might have overlooked in the past, were extraordinary now. They were proof that family is rebuilt not in dramatic reconciliations, but in shared effort, shared time, and shared presence. My daughter joined us with a tray of lemonade, smiling at the two of us. For a brief moment, all the years of distance and pain felt irrelevant. We were here, together, alive and present. And that presence, I realized, was the most powerful form of love, confronting the past to embrace the future. Despite the healing, I knew the past would always be a part of us. The mistakes, the absence, the moments I couldn't reclaim, they were scars, reminders of the lessons we had learned too late. But scars are not only proof of pain, they are proof of survival. They are proof that we endured, that we faced our fears, and that we chose to grow instead of giving up. I shared this truth with my children one evening, sitting together on the porch. "We cannot change what happened before," I said quietly. "We cannot undo the years we lost. But we can choose now, every day, to be present, to love honestly, to listen without judgment, to forgive and allow ourselves to be forgiven. That is how we rebuild. That is how we honor each other and ourselves." My daughter nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. My son squeezed my hand. And in that silent moment, I felt the culmination of years of regret, fear, and hope, the quiet strength of family enduring despite everything. The moral of presence and love. I learned that life is fragile, that time slips through our fingers faster than we realize, that fear, pride, and regret can keep us from the people we love most. But I also learned that presence, consistency, and honesty can rebuild what seems lost. Love is not always spoken. It is often demonstrated through actions, through showing up when it matters most, through listening, through being patient and vulnerable. Forgiveness, too, is a process. It is not always immediate, but it grows when we remain present and open to healing. The greatest lesson I carry from this journey is this: never wait for the perfect moment to show love. Never wait for someone to change or for circumstances to be easier. Life will always be unpredictable. People will make mistakes. But if you choose presence, if you choose courage, if you choose to be there, you give love and yourself the chance to endure. The quiet ending. I now sit quietly in my living room, watching my children laugh over a board game, my wife recovering steadily nearby, the sun casting warm light across the room. The years of absence, the mistakes, the regrets, they are still there, but they no longer control us. They serve as reminders to cherish the present. I realize that happiness does not come from perfection. It comes from connection, from showing up, from being present, and from allowing ourselves and the people we love to be seen, flaws and all. I whisper softly, as if speaking to the universe itself. We are here. We are together. We are present. And that is enough. The journey has been painful, humbling, and deeply emotional. But it has also been beautiful. And now, finally, I understand the quiet strength of family, the enduring power of love, and the transformative force of presence. No grand ending is needed. No dramatic resolution. Just the simple, profound truth. Showing up, being present, and loving honestly is the most meaningful way to live. And with that, our story, our real, imperfect, deeply human story, continues.